Is there a way to predict if the Trump administration would take the military course all the way?
That latter point you made, I think, is true. And let me back up and give a little bit more explication of what's happening there. I'm 90% sure of this because I have some contacts still that will talk to me. What has been going on has been a joint operation, maybe even more than a joint operation in terms of a third or a fourth party, but there are certainly two parties in this. One, of course, is the empire, the United States, but the other, very substantively, is Israel. Israel is there big time. Israel has been there since the first finding in the 2016 year of Trump's first administration. Israel is a part of the intelligence picture, whether it's false, fair, accurate, or whatever. And in most cases, I think it's pretty false. And Israel is a manipulator of the intelligence that Trump is getting. One of the people giving Trump the intelligence is an Israeli citizen, dual citizen, of course, which is what we like to have in this country. But he's an Israeli citizen. He's linked with a former CIA individual who are giving for money Laura Loomer intelligence from Venezuela that they say is accurate, and Trump is turning his turning his face away from the vested intelligence community, starting with Tulsi Gabbard and others, and listening to Laura Loomer. So he's getting his intelligence about Trinalagua, about drugs, and so forth from a source that's being paid by certain members of the opposition in Venezuela to give him that intelligence. You can't make this up. Israel is a big part of that. And the person who's working with this CIA operative is an Israeli citizen, as I said. You got the Nobel Peace Prize winner, as you said, Machado, who is plugged into it too. I won't go this far, but I will at least surmise that she might be a Mossad asset. So you have all of this going on. And then to come to your question, is any of this really going to overthrow Nicolas Maduro and the government he represents? I don't think so. And I think it's going to be a real disaster if we try to use major force majeure, to do it. Whether we sneak up on it or we frontally assault it, it makes no difference. We're going to get our hands tied in a mess. Think Vietnam, think Afghanistan, think any of the wars that we've been involved. Think Somalia, for example, when we went in supposedly to do humanitarian good and wound up chasing warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid and had to withdraw ignominiously from Mogadishu. That's what we're looking at. And this president doesn't seem to have a grasp of this sort of thing. And he doesn't have a Secretary of Defense in Pete Hegseth who has a grasp of this sort of thing. And he doesn't have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff either. His chairman came from the Pacific Theater, where he was a three-star general, mostly involved in special operations. And here's another thing that most people don't understand. Fast, way back when Sam Nunn was in the Senate of the United States, Sam Nunn had a burr up his saddle that he wanted to form a special operations command that would put all the special operators, Delta, SEAL teams, 6 and 5 and 4 and 2, the Rangers, the CCT in the Air Force, the Raiders in the Marine Corps. Eventually, the Marine Corps came in, all under a single command, make it a unified command and give it a budget. Well, he did. We all told Senator Nunn he was crazy. Even Colin Powell told him he was crazy. They went ahead and did it. And guess what happened? Now that command has grown up to be so powerful and so integral to U.S. strategy in the world because it's linked to the CIA. The CIA uses the special operating forces in the military for direct action. That way, it doesn't have to risk its own people, and it doesn't have to report to its oversight committee in the Congress because it's the military executing the direct action. And what's happening and what caused, I think, Admiral Halsey to say he was leaving early from Southern Command's command is those special operators with their mothership down there off Venezuela, and their mothership is a former cruise ship. It's huge. It's monstrous. It has all kinds of laboratories inside of it, all kinds of intelligence devices. It can land. It can land Harriers. It can land helicopters. And what's happening is, without the conventional force commander, Admiral Halsey, commander of Southern Command, it's his region, without him even having anything to say about it, these special operators operating under Special Operations Command in Florida are, in fact, carrying out these actions against Venezuela. This is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It happened in Mogadishu. When we made the ignominious retreat from Mogadishu, it was because Special Operations Command was going after Mohammed Farah Aidid on their own without the Turkish commander of the UN force or the US commander knowing anything about it. That's what we're doing in Venezuela in spades, I think. I have very strong feelings about this because I've seen it happening. It happened in Afghanistan. It happened in Iraq. It happened, as I said, in Somalia. I think it's happening again. And each time it happens, they grow more and more powerful. So this is another army, if you will, with its Air Force, Navy, and everything else too, within the US military operating for the CIA and Mossad. And they're doing things like Venezuela. So if you want to see some action in Venezuela, you're probably going to see that kind of action joined at the hip with Machado's people, whatever, whomever they are. But I agree with you. The opposition, such as it is in Venezuela, is turning against not Maduro, but turning against the effort of the empire to overthrow Maduro because they see what's happening and they understand what's happening. They understand Machado wants to sell Venezuela to the empire. Period. That's what she wants. She's been very straightforward about that. And this isn't going to work. I think we're in for a real mess, a real mess. But the people who are going to feel the effects of that mess are probably the Venezuelans and maybe the Colombians too, because Trump has turned a nasty eye on Colombia also.
It is known to almost everyone in Venezuela that while there is a debate about the sanctions when it comes to military intervention, the Lopezes and Guaidos and the Machados are all people who lives in Florida or other parts of the United States and not real people living in Venezuela. And I also wanted to add that, as you indicated, that there seems to be division within the military and the intelligence, probably within the military, people who know the reality of Venezuela and those who the partisan hacks and those all the on the payrolls of Mossad and so on. I think the fact is that in Venezuela, the military is extremely politicized, and this is a distinction between, for instance, Chile in 1973, where Allende Salvador didn't go after the military to replace with his own people, which is not the case in Venezuela. So in Venezuela, the military is extremely hooked into the whole Bolivarian process, meaning thereby that any kind of attempt of coup is extremely difficult in Venezuela. And one might disbelieve numbers of millions of militias being recruited. Those 7 million, 8 million might be overstated, I don't know, but it is true that there is a popular consensus, unanimous consensus in Venezuela against US military intervention.
Yes, I'm a student of the Chilean episode with Nixon and Kissinger, and I can tell you it's quite different. The Chilean military was really on our side throughout all those years because we had bought them, essentially. And they knew because we had bought them, if it were a coup that was successful, they would be in charge. And so all they did was fight over who the general would be that would be in charge. A little bit different situation here. We have not been through the School of America of the Americas or whatever. We have not been up close and personal with the Venezuelan military in any way other than maybe some CIA infiltration and trying to bribe people. That could have happened. I suspect it has. But I don't think they've been very successful in that effort because the military has basically been loyal. So this would be an entirely different operation. You would probably have the bulk of the military, the Venezuelan military, against you from the get go. That's a very different situation than buying the military out and having them, even as they did in Chile, turn on Allende and produce who they produced, which was not too good for Chile. So I think what we're looking at is a true guerrilla war that we'll lose. And while I would love to see us lose in a situation like that yet again and try to teach us a lesson in terms of those kinds of things, I don't want to see that pain brought on Venezuela or on Colombia or Nigeria or anywhere else, especially not when it's not called for. They are not threat. Here's the fundamental thing: they are not threats to the national security of the United States. Trump and his Justice Department and his Defense Department leap through hoops every day with the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate orchestrating their leaps and being very, very supportive of them to substantiate that what they're doing is in the name of the national security of the empire, which is preposterous. Even with Iran, it's preposterous. Iran presents no threat of significance to the empire, unless the empire wants to sit in the middle of the Persian Gulf and wave a flag, which President Ahmadinejad once said to me in New York. Let me see if I've got this right now. Iran owns about 1,875 kilometers of Persian Gulf coastline, and the United States owns how many kilometers? His point, very vivid point. The threat in the Persian Gulf was not from Iran. The threat was from the United States of America. And everybody in the region knew that, even the Saudis and the Emiratis and others. So there is no threat to the national security of the United States from any of these targets that Trump is looking at, with the possible exception of China. And, what are we doing there? That's another issue altogether, but it's a big issue. It's a huge issue. It's a nuclear issue.
I want to actually come to China, but just a side comment on the threat. It reminded me of some of these debates in the 80s about US generals saying that Nicaragua and possibly even Cuba are posing great threats to the United States. And in one of these debates, Noam Chomsky said that it would be a disservice to even Hitler, saying that his narrative that Czechoslovakia was a threat to Germany would be similar to the threat caused by Cuba or Nicaragua to the United States. I mean, even Hitler might have some point when he made a statement about Czechoslovakia. I mean, such is the absurdity of US inventing threats from these small nations.